This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, January 2nd show. I'm committed to providing you knowledge needed to be successful in every area regarding your financing. Knowledge is power, and that's what you'll receive by listening to my show. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast, but you can call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150. Or online at themoneyhour.com. You can ask any questions, get connected with the guests that I have in studio, or I love to hear from my listeners on topics that you want me to bring into studio. And right now in studio, I'm going to have a conversation with Frank Scivally with the Cascade Team. Everything you need to know about buying or selling a business in today's market. And I've had my show for 5 years, and I was actually looking back, and this is the first time that I've actually had a conversation regarding to buying and selling a business. I'm really excited, Frank, to have a conversation with you. Thanks for joining me in studio.
Thank you.
And a little bit about Frank. Frank is a retired Air Force officer, MS, MBA, and university professor. He is a past president of 2 publicly traded companies and previously owned a retail franchise. In 2003, Frank partnered with his wife, Lisa, to enter into the profession of business brokering on a full-time basis. In April of 2004, they affiliated with Business Broker Network. Their company, the Dove Group LLC, was based in Tucson, Arizona. As owners of the Dove Group, they were in charge of all aspects of the business and brokerage services for the company. Then in spring of 2007, Frank and Lisa joined a brokerage franchise to expand the company's operations across the Southwest region and to provide professional brokerage services to business clients in the state of Arizona, New Mexico, and Western Texas regions. Now in 2012, they moved here to our great Seattle area and joined the Cascade Team, where Frank now practices as a business and commercial broker with Cascade. His diverse brokerage teaching and business coaching background affords him the opportunity to assist buyers and sellers in virtually all market segments. Again, right now we're going to be discussing purchasing or selling businesses. So, Frank, what type of businesses do you typically represent?
Well, we can typically represent virtually any business as long as it's a truly viable business, meaning that it's been profitable for more than 3 to 5 years. And with that said, it's literally any type of business: manufacturing, distribution, retail and service companies, even professional companies like CPA firms and dental and medical clinics. For example, one of my current listings is a painting company down in Tacoma. They have 20 years of service and profitability. And I'm also representing 2 franchises. One is a small mobile detailing franchise, and the other is a medical-related franchise. So, we run the gamut. We can do just about anything from representation of a business, whether it's from a buyer's side or a seller's side.
So, Frank, what is the most important aspect of selling and buying a business?
Well, knowing the true value of the business is the most important aspect. Most people, or most owners, really don't know what their business is worth. For example, I had one recently where the owner thought his business was worth about $100,000 and would have been very happy to sell it for that. After working with him a short period of time, we derived that the business was really worth about $250,000. We put it on the market at $250,000 and sold it for $225,000.
That's pretty exciting.
So, very happy. Both of us were happy, and it worked out very well for him, and it worked out for the buyer. And I'm still working with the buyer now on a consulting basis to improve those profits even more.
Yeah, I bet it's a totally different arena when talking about businesses versus our residential real estate when you're looking at comps and things. So what is a primary reason for selling or buying a business?
Well, from the selling side, it's usually retirement or something changes within the family. Maybe the owner's just tired of doing what they're doing day to day and wants to try a new venture. And sometimes it's illness-related, medical-related, so that's it. People who want to buy a business are generally looking to expand their horizons, get out of the corporate rat race, and move on to something that's a little more fun, and sometimes even build a legacy for their family. So all numbers of reasons for buying a business, and all of them are good, honestly. If you find something you really like to do, it's not really a job. It's a real profession.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's get back to price or value. So how do you determine price or value on a business?
Well, I use a proprietary pricing model that I've used now for 15 years to determine the seller's discretionary value of the business. And what that means is basically it's the profitability of the business with all the add backs like the owner's salary and the perks that he normally would pay for out of the business that really should be added back in. Once I have that seller's discretionary earning figure, or the SDE, I use a multiple that's geared for that particular type of business. Some businesses, the multiple would be as little as 1, and for some it could be as high as 10. So with that multiple, we make that calculation that then becomes the value that we list it for.
So should anyone buy or sell a business themselves? I would imagine not using a broker could possibly be a pretty big mistake.
Well, in the case we talked about a little earlier where the owner was going to sell his business for $100,000 and would have been quite happy to do that, he would have left $125,000 on the table.
Good point.
So, yeah, you can definitely sell a business without a broker, but you have to be willing to take all that time to get the business ready for sale, market it, entertain buyer requests, qualify buyers, negotiate the price and terms, and then get it closed. And that's quite a process that you have to add to what you're doing day to day. So in most cases, it's just a lot easier to hire a broker to do it for you.
Got it. And what about the time for closing? What would be an average or typical time to, once a contract is signed, to actually close in today's market?
Oh, that can be, once the contract's signed, it can be fairly short, generally from a few weeks to a month or so. But you have to expect that it's going to take 3 months to up to a year to actually sell your business from start to finish, because the marketing period is very long in a business sale, or can be.
Okay.
And in some cases, it never sells. I mean, honestly, only about 30 to 40% of businesses actually sell.
Wow. And what about how a seller would find a buyer for their business, or how a buyer would find a particular seller if they want that type of business?
Well,
is there an MLS for businesses?
Yeah, there are. They're not very well known. There's places like Biz by Sell and Merger Place, and national databases like that. We use all of those. In Washington, you can actually put your business on the MLS. It doesn't show you a lot. They don't give you a lot of really great numbers like you'll find in those other listings.
Okay.
But no matter where you list your business and whatever you're looking for, make sure you do your due diligence if you're a buyer and that you're actually buying something that has value. Have someone do that value calculation that we talked about earlier for you. And honestly, this is a great place to hire a broker, if nothing more than just consult with them to do that work for you, so that you know you're buying something that has value.
Well, and I'm anybody here that's a regular listener to the show knows that I firmly believe in hiring an expert for anything that we do. I mean, there's just too many things that change, and I couldn't even imagine, purchasing a business on your own. It's not something that you definitely do every day. Now, what about purchasing under an LLC or corporation?
Well, you can still buy those. The purchase is a little different in that you're buying the entity. In most cases, requires a stock sale. So if you're buying a corporation, you're actually buying the stock of the corporation and keeping that corporation intact. An LLC is a little bit differently. In most cases, an LLC will cease to exist, and the new owner will start a new LLC and just buy the assets from the old one. But it can be done. If you're going to do that, you almost always have to have an attorney who specializes in those matters to handle it for you.
And what about including real property in the sale or purchase of the business?
Yes, you definitely can include real property as a part of the sale. The property is generally transferred in a separate transfer that will close at the same time as the business transfer. The two transfers are linked so that one can't happen without the other. And I'm also licensed to handle real estate, so I can handle that as well. But you just want to make sure that the timing is right, so that when the business transfers, the property transfers with it, and they're not separated by weeks or days.
Okay. And who chooses a business sale and handles all of the paperwork, Frank?
Well, we use different types of closers. Like I said earlier, if you're doing an LLC or a corporation, you need an attorney who specializes in that arena. But in most cases, we can use a normal title and escrow company that just has to make sure that we get a good bill of sale, that all the environmental stuff is taken care of, and it's all wrapped up in one nice package. And there are a few folks who work for different title and escrow companies that can handle those for us.
So outside of title and escrow, Frank, who are the other big players in the team process for you?
Well, if you need financing, obviously the bank's the biggest
Yep.
player. They're going to make sure everything's done properly and that all the environmental is taken care of and the inspections are done, obviously. And they're not going to loan on something that doesn't have real value, same as in a residential deal. But, it's different. There's also different experts. Like if you we're buying a company with a lot of inventory, say a convenience store or something like that, you want to hire someone who does that for you. So you're not in there counting each item over the course of a week. They come in for a couple of hours and do it all for you.
Okay. So, Frank, how do you advise your sellers to add value to their business, and when can they learn more about the process of selling or buying?
Well, I always recommend a focused value-building approach using a tried and tested methodologies like the ones you find at my other site, PacificNorthwestAdvisors.com. You can You can also request a free copy of my book, Selling My Business, or you can contact me for a free consultation, or just give me a call at my phone number 425-442-6293, or shoot me an email at info@PacificNorthwestAdvisors.
Perfect. And as always, if you want to get a hold of any of my guests that I have in studio, you can go directly to my website. They'll have all their contact information, or call the show. Now, Frank, what is the biggest issue that you see that comes up during a business transaction?
The biggest issue is that the seller is reporting or passes out information that's not entirely correct. In other words, the sales are off, or they're paying an employee that's really not an employee, those kind of things. The other things are, in certain companies, are environmental issues that have been dormant for a while and now are found during a phase one.
Wow.
and have to be taken care of.
So is there somebody like an inspector, like you have a home inspector goes in there and looks for issues with the property? Is there someone like an inspector or somebody that comes in and looks at the whole business and makes sure, I'm sure with your CPA and all of those different people, but to make sure that you're protected?
Well, depending on the business, you want to hire the right professionals. For example, just to do a phase one environmental, you have to hire someone who's certified in doing those things.
Yep.
So, the buyer, as a part of his due diligence and feasibility study, has to do that.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as just making sure your business is not going to be located in a floodplain, that you don't have to pay exorbitant flood insurance prices.
What about some potential deal breakers?
Oh, like I said earlier, it's the deal breakers are primarily things that are reported in the listing, or that the seller says that are not necessarily true. And the other one is the fact that the business just isn't worth what is reported.
Yeah.
So that happens all the time. Another thing, too, is that during a feasibility study, once we really get down to the nitty-gritty, the buyer decides that, this really isn't a business for me. And maybe a spouse or another family member joins in and says, we really just don't want to do this. So
I don't want you working all those hours. I want you to spend time at home with the kids.
Exactly. Because you do have a second marriage with a business.
Yes. What about, is it typical, or do you see where when someone comes in and purchases a business that maybe they've contracted the owner to stick around and to help with the transition?
Well, we always build in a transition period from a couple of weeks to 30 days or so. But in a lot of cases, I advise new buyers to take on the old owner for up to a year.
Okay.
There are certain rules with that. The SBA, for example, won't let an old owner stay on for more than a year in a business that's SBA financed. But if you can keep the new owner around and he's actually providing a great service for you, whether it's on an employment basis or as a consulting basis, it really does make sense.
And I think just if you've got employees, just for that point to have the transition into the new ownership with the employees. I've worked with companies that hasn't been the case versus has, and it's a lot easier process and lose a lot less people. Now, what about any of my listeners that are listening today that are considering buying? what should they think about before, to determine whether this makes sense for them? Now, we already talked about the, being a second spouse and really having to commit the time. What other things should they be considering if this is going to be something that's right for them?
Well, you have to do a lot of soul searching. And is this something I really want to do? Can I actually devote the time and effort, money, and resources to make this happen for me? So in the beginning, before you go out and say, I want that business, you really do have to get some really good advice from people you trust and family members to make sure that it is something you really want to do.
So, Frank, in residential or in real estate, as you know, there are certain times of the year that are better for, buying and selling property. What about businesses? I guess it may make a difference on what type of business it is, but are there better times during the year to sell and buy?
Well, from a seller's aspect, generally right at the end of the year, especially if you take a big down payment at the end of the year, you can carry some of that gain into the next year, and it helps a little bit for tax purposes. But from a buyer standpoint, you always want to buy prior to the peak season if you can. And most businesses have peak season cycles. So if you can hit it just before that, that's great.
So like a ski resort, you want to buy right before the snow comes.
Exactly.
And what about most common contingencies? Or, I'm just trying to compare with a typical real estate transaction. Are there contingencies within the contract that are common?
Oh, sure. It's actually the same contingencies that you would see in a real estate contract.
Okay.
Financing, feasibility. And honestly, we always put in a 30-day out. So if within 30 days it's not going to work for them, they can out on that as well.
Got it.
So I'm very conscientious about making sure that a buyer can extract himself from a deal if, for example, it's not the right opportunity for them.
Okay. So, Frank, if somebody is thinking just in the very beginning stages of thinking about maybe purchasing a business, not really sure what kind of business, what they want to do, and they come to you and say, can you be out there looking for some great opportunities and deal? Do you kind of put things together and have properties and businesses ready to place with people?
Well, I can do that with franchises.
Okay.
Certainly. We have a whole gamut of franchises that we can look at. And in many cases, that's the best option for someone who hasn't been in business before.
Is to purchase in a franchise.
Yeah. Because it really is a cookie cutter
Yep.
Operation.
I hear it's quite a process to purchase a McDonald's.
Yeah, well, there are not many of those for sale either. So, but if you're buying a small franchise, generally they're very well laid out. They have all the operational and all the things that you really need to get that business up and running. They have in place. So, if you don't know what you want to do, if you're not looking at a specific business, I would certainly say look at a franchise model.
So what would be your suggestion if I was thinking about buying a business, which I'm not, but if I was thinking, what type of franchises in our area here?
Well, like I said, I have a new franchise coming on that is a health-related franchise, weight loss.
Okay.
Basically a spa franchise.
Oh, spa sounds nice.
And I actually we have a master franchise opportunity for that in Washington. So, so with a master franchise, obviously you're operating your franchise plus you have oversight for a number of others. So we don't have that one available now. It's doing very, very well in California and Arizona, and it's moving its way up the coast as we speak.
So again, if you want any information and to talk with Frank directly, you can call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150, or go online at themoneyhour.com. Frank, I got to wrap things up here, but any last final comment you'd like to make to my listeners before I take us to break?
Well, just for sellers, I'd like to say if you're considering selling, try to look a year down the path. Make sure that you're putting your ducks in a row now in order to get ready to sell a year or 18 months down the road, because you want to put your best foot forward, just like you would in a house. You want to make sure it's ready to sell. Same with your business. You want to make sure it's prepped and ready to sell before you actually put it on the market.
Great advice. Frank, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun having a conversation with you about purchasing and selling businesses. I appreciate you coming in and sharing your expertise with my listeners.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Coming up next on the Money Hour, are you relocating with your company to Seattle or just moving here for a great job opportunity? Barry Bergner with Real Logics at Sotheby's International Realty right here on 1150 AM KKNW after this short break.